All right, so now we're going to ink this scene, and I'll make sure you got access to this artwork. This is something I drew in this very program. It took a few hours to do, but just kind of a fun scene, and really just practice. This wasn't for a comic or anything like that, but I thought it'd be a great example for you to ink with. So it's got some inconsistencies, which I think is important to deal with because you want to realize that not every scene is going to fall into exact perspective when you're inking it. And sometimes you're just going to kind of ink what's there. Other times you're going to correct a little bit. So we'll talk about that. But whenever I do this, the first thing I want to do is think about where is the perspective. So for instance, I drew this one so I know where it's at. But if this was handed off to me by another artist, then I might need to worry a little bit more about where this perspective might fall. It's pretty easy to find, especially, you can tell by looking at this, this is a 1 point or a single point perspective. And again, I've already defined it here because I did it as I was drawing the scene, and this program supports, perspective rulers. You just go layer, ruler, create perspective ruler. So we'll just go ahead and do it. And 1 point perspective, hit OK. And then what you want to do is you're going to move this around. So you're going to use the selection tool here. Select it and move it around, and then you're going to grab these little circles here, and they're kind of hard to see, but you're going to move those around and kind of figure out where this could go. Now the other way to do it is you can grab the plus sign and you can actually force the vanishing point to move, so you could just position these on a couple of the more paramount areas within the work. I would say this line's pretty much where the vanishing point resides. But you want to be careful not to pick the wrong thing. So for instance, you could pick one of the computer screens, and it could very well be incorrect. Now the other thing is this, the panel is tilted, so this needs to be tilted as well. So pick one of the straight lines or horizontal lines within the scene. And this happens a lot, right? You get a scene that they want to add a little bit more drama or a dynamic vibe to, and they tilt it so it's a little bit more intense and not so so plain or whatever. But so you just kind of play around with this and get these to line up, and they're not going to line up to everything, especially if you're working with maybe an artist that isn't as comfortable with perspective and they do a little bit of faking. That happens a lot in comics. You kind of fake perspective. Some people are very adamant about getting correct perspective on every scene, and other people just kind of throw a building here and there. So you got to be careful as to where you try to guide yourself. You want to find the most correctness within the scene. You see, I'm having a hard time, and it's my own scene. It's pretty crazy, but I could easily just go for lines that I know are in perspective. It would be this one here, and it's probably a little bit of that tilt that I got to get right. I think you can also pull, once you grab the plus sign, just keep in mind if you're working in this program, you can pull out as far as you need to. So what happens is if you grab too tightly near the plus signs, you're going to get this quick jolt. But if you pull away while clicking on the screen, you can still maneuver this and have a little bit more control. So let's say something like that. Let's check a few more of these. I'm not going to worry about the computer screens because I know I freehanded a lot of those in. And again, that's kind of what you're going to want to think about when inking over somebody else's work. Well, some of that stuff looks like they just kind of winged it. They just kind of went with it. So go for the more, the bigger lines, basically. Things that that probably should be in perspective, like these windows. The bottom, it almost seems like this needs to come up a little bit higher. Well, let's do this. Let's check it with the one that I originally defined. See, I have it lower there. So let's double check that right here. Grab one of these. Remember, grab the circle if you don't want to distort it, and then grab the plus signs if you do want to move your vanishing point. So just like that. So you're going to initially start with that. Now the other way to do this is really, let me get rid of this one so it doesn't get confusing here. The other way to do this is just, if you're working in this program even, is shift click. So you can create straight lines that way, and obviously that's the one that's the most resemblant of traditional art, right? You just put a ruler on it and you start going to town. And I could really do this entire scene that way, but I want to show you a variety of ways. I don't want to just show you one way because we all create very differently. So let's jump in here and start inking. I'm going to turn that perspective ruler off for now, or perspective layer. And I want to zoom in here. One of the things I like to do when doing a scene like this is first spot in the blacks. So I'm going to just take my G pen. Remember, this is just a solid brush, thick to thin. Nothing too groundbreaking, but you always want to, in my opinion, you always want to use a brush that gives you a variation. Now, with this particular software, I can just hold shift click and I could go around some of these shapes pretty quickly. I might need to go back and touch them up. The shift click method on this one doesn't work as well as I found on some other programs, but it still works. So you could just get your base kind of shapes in place. Remember, you could do this with the polyline tool as well. So whatever you like. And just kind of bring that line back together, try a flood fill, and just like that you've got your starting point. And you can always get in here and nudge these corners, round over some edges. So if you feel like it just looks too blocky, round in some of these edges, round over some of this, add a little detail here and there, some buttons, add to the silhouette. Silhouettes are always fun and interesting. And it's a great way to encapsulate the scene. So it immediately puts the viewer, further back behind some other objects in the distance. I always like using this effect. And then again, same thing over here. You don't have to shift click. You could just draw this out. This is typically probably what I do for most things, but seeing how it is a pretty techy, futuristic scene, then the shift click is great for getting those very, those very straight computer object type lines. So just make sure your edges are filled in, and obviously you got to love the flood fill. It's just so quick and easy. And then jump in here and add some of these cables and wires. These are easy to do, and again, add another kind of neat dynamic to the scene. I always like playing around with these concepts. So try to vary these up a bit. You can even make some thinner, make some thicker, make some wrap around the other one. And you can also get in there with some negative lines, and you could do like little divides to make it look more detailed and segmented and so on. So just like that, we've got a little bit of our foreground element. And we should probably get a frame in here. So really probably the first step, I'm just going to call this inks. And probably the first step is add in a border. So just grab this rectangle tool, hold shift, and that's going to give you a square. Let go of shift, that's going to give you a rectangle. More or less what I need to do though is get the thickness up. So if you pay attention to down here, the brush side is going to directly relate to the border. So the thicker we make that, the thicker the border we get, kind of test it out. That's almost a little too heavy for what I want. Back that down just a little bit. Remember, you can use your bracket keys on the keyboard. Left bracket is smaller, right bracket is larger or thicker. And something right about there, Command Z. And then I'm just going to roughly throw it in. It doesn't need to match because what I'm going to do is hit Command T. I'm going to rotate it into place. And let's see. Oh, you know what? And that's unfortunate. Command C a couple times. I need to add a layer. Let's double click here. Call this frame. And now draw that out. Got to be back on this tool. Draw that out. And really we can just hit Command Shift T. So I'm just going to distort this right to where it goes. It'll be faster. So Command Shift T is your distort. Command T is your transform and scale. You see how easy that is. So that's just, let's just go with what's easiest, right? And fastest. So there's that. We've got our frame. Now we can kind of contain all our inks inside there. We've got a little bit of our silhouette going. We can jump back over to here and we can work on this part. So again, kind of draw in this shape. Now the only thing is, since our frame is floating above, remember to draw across. So just fill in the top, fill in the bottom, encapsulate those inks, flood fill, touch up, and move on to the next one. So again, these little wires are always fun. You see I'm trying to make some that are noticeably thicker. This one here I actually tried to be creative and put like a little hub or clip of some kind. So just so it reads differently. So basically taking a thicker wire, a little clip, and then a thinner wire. Just little ideas like that. Nothing too groundbreaking, but I think it's important to just, experiment where you can, so that when you start to make a scene that's more detailed, or you want it to read more detailed, you have more variation in those details. They don't have to be much. So again, we can do some of these little half moon lines to convey segmentation. You could take this a bit further as well. You could probably get in here and detail each one of these little pieces. So it depends on what you're really trying to accomplish. I'm going to go with less is more right there. And just like that, double click here to straighten out your canvas. And just like that, we've got our frame and we've got some silhouettes to, again, kind of encapsulate the screen, or scene, I should say, and give us a bit more depth. So let's go ahead and wrap up here, head over to the next lesson, and start to refine the scene a bit more.